Yo, what's up guys? Welcome back to another tutorial. Today we're going to talk about creating this cool interactive building which you can use for your music videos. Recently featured in the new music video for The London with Young Thug, Travis Scott, JCole. So let's go ahead and break that down quickly. We're only going to be talking about creating this interactive building within After Effects. We're going to use Element 3D for this with the Metropolitan Pack. If you don't have the Metropolitan Pack, I'll talk about finding some other building models for free. It's pretty easy. And of course you can do this with a lot of other 3D softwares. Having that built-in Element 3D After Effects workflow though makes this pretty simple. So we'll go over everything from creating the camera movements. We'll talk about going from one window to another, going through the clouds like this. We'll talk about actually designing the building to get that nice reflection in the glass. We'll talk about creating some light flares here like in the original video. And then of course we'll go over tracking and how you can get footage into these different windows and transition into them to bring in different shots. So let's bring in the actual music video here. Now I think that my version with Element 3D is pretty similar for what we're going for. Of course, this is a high budget music video. They have endless money to spend on something like this, but let's go through with a quick little breakdown of what we're going to show you. So pretty simple. They have a nice reflective building and then they zoom up. You can see that this is basically just a screenshot of the footage they're going to transition to, and they use a nice little zoom transition just to go into there and blend it all together as if they're going through the glass. Pretty interesting concept with the building security and being able to switch between different things happening in the building. So like I said, we'll go over different tracking methods for getting these scenes in the windows of the buildings. Now I also want to say that just to get this footage, set your camera up on a tripod and make sure you get that full wide angle shot as if you are looking into the room. That makes it easier for compositing. So you'll have to think of it in that fashion. I mean, you could even use a green screen. I'm sure that for a lot of these shots, they could have had the models on a green screen and then actually composited in backgrounds just using pictures on the internet. So they have some nice camera movement and then they do a lot of cool, interesting transitions like going through this vent here, putting together a room, putting those bricks in between and then making it look like you're traveling through the building itself and then switching just to normal hallway footage. And that's really about it, guys. Like I said, we're really going to focus on the building animation itself. So let's hop right into it. So I'm going to do some touching up work like adding in the fog in Premiere as well as the color grading. So to get our After Effects work for the building itself into Premiere, what I'm going to do is first let's start from scratch. I'll go to File, New, Sequence. We'll start fresh. Now next what I want to do is come to my project bin here, click this new page item, and click transparent video. If you don't see that, just resize this building window here so that you can. So bring in our transparent video and then drag that into our comp. Now let's give ourselves maybe like a minute of room. This really depends on the shot, but we can trim it up later. And we're going to right click on this transparent video and replace it with an After Effects composition to bring that into After Effects. So now anything we create within After Effects in this blank composition will show up within Adobe Premiere. So let's delete this and now we can start from scratch. Okay guys, now we're in After Effects. Like I said, we're going to be using Element 3D for this. I'm guessing a lot of you that clicked on this probably already have Element 3D because I've made a lot of videos talking about it. But if you don't, I'll leave a link below to the Video Copilot website where you can check it out and possibly pick it up yourself. Let's go ahead and get started. We're going to right click down here and go to New and then go to Solid, and we're going to make a black solid here and we're going to name this our building. Go ahead and click OK. Now with this black solid we can head over to our effects and presets and we can look up the Element 3D effect to place on here. Drop that there. Now let's go back up to our top left in our effect controls and click Scene Setup to open up Element 3D. Okay, so here we are in Element 3D. Like I said, if you have the Metropolitan Pack, automatically going to have the buildings which I use for this tutorial. And if you see, you can click here and go through a bunch of these different options. If you don't have the Metropolitan Pack, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go to one of these free 3D model websites. So I'm using Turbo Squid here. If you want a wider list of where you can find these models, I made a full video talking about that. So check it out. I'll leave that link below. We're just going to go and search for building, and you guys can look through here, just switch price to free, or if you are working with a budget, you can look through your different options and you'll see you want to find something that's either an OBJ or a C4D file. Search via the formats here, but that's what's compatible with Element 3D. And like I said, if you're working with C4D, Blender, whatever it is to create the building look itself, if you are versed in how to do that, then you guys can pick up whatever file format. Just make sure you have a building similar to what we're going after. You don't have to completely recreate this building itself. This tutorial is more just to show you the steps behind creating a animation like flying through different parts of a building and all the ins and outs surrounding this. So find your building. Like I said, we'll use the Metropolitan pack, and the one that I used for this is Building One Night. Now, the only issue with this is that the windows are a little bit too small when it comes to compositing in things or tracking things. So if you're going to fly into something, maybe track a wider area, but don't try and track into these little like chocolate bar size windows. Or what you can do is go for a different building that maybe has bigger windows, something like this. And this is going to show you the little texture maps that they have applied for us, which is going to come in handy later in terms of customizing this. The second thing we want to do is add an environment to this so we can have nice reflection on these windows. And that's a big part of what really sells this effect. You'll see as you move closer in this, they have these reflections of the city in the background. So let's go ahead and add that in. Hop back to After Effects, click Environment in Element 3D. And you're going to see these little drop downs. This comes with Element 3D whenever you do pick it up. So click this arrow, go to Load from File, and it should automatically open up wherever your environment folder is. So the one that I actually use for this, so it's under Basic 2K, and I used this one here. So let's open that up, and just so we can actually get buildings in our reflections, which is what we're really after. So open that up. Click OK, and you'll see immediately it adds reflections to our windows. Now what you guys can do is, we'll click OK for now. Let's actually look at this and see what this reflection is really looking at. So if I rotate a little bit to the left, you'll start seeing those buildings, especially if I kind of tip the camera down. Maybe at the top part here, you don't want to see the reflections of all this stuff. You guys can go back to environment. You can actually take these UVs and you can kind of change them around, maybe bump down the vertical, just to really customize the look of what reflections you're going to be seeing. So if you maybe turn it left, now you have more buildings in those window reflections when you are flying in. So make sure you utilize that tip to fully customize that reflection to get that realistic look. And now we're going to click OK. All right, guys, so we have our building in here. To actually interact with this, we're going to need to right click down here and go to New, and then bring in a camera, and then click OK. And now with our camera in here, we can actually click C on our keyboard to swap around our camera controls in terms of rotating, in terms of moving around, and then zooming in and out. By clicking C and toggling through them to position the camera where I want it. And for our opening shot, you're going to want to have it something around like this. And then eventually we'll create the animations where it'll zoom up into our windows. Before we do all that, let's go in and customize the look of our building even more through our element settings. So go ahead and select your building layer. You're going to want to go over to our render settings first, and let's go ahead and start messing around with some stuff. So first off, let's make this building look a little bit better. What we're going to do is head over to ambient occlusion, enable AO, and change the ambient occlusion mode from SSAO to ray traced, and you'll see automatically it just creates more realistic looking buildings. If you want a little bit more info on ray tracing, I made a full comprehensive video talking about what ray tracing can do, what GPU acceleration can do. It was a whole sponsored video with NVIDIA. We're gonna have some more sponsored segment things in future videos, but I thought I'd mention that because it's pretty relevant here to what we're doing. So link to that below. But that's just a mention, that isn't technically sponsored for this video. So that's looking well and good. You can head over to lighting next, and then you can change any of these presets to get a nice little start on what you want your lighting to be. Now in the original animation I showed you at the beginning, I used either natural or underwater to get that kind of blue fringing to match our background, which we're about to add in a few moments. So go ahead and choose any of those, maybe natural. We'll do full color correction and grading at the end to try and match this and make it look more realistic. So now there's also a glow option here. You can enable glow, but I recommend you don't do that until afterwards because we're going to be wanting to track within these areas and we don't want the glow to mess with that. So we'll do that at the end once we have created our camera animations. We created all the little tracks that we want in terms of moving around past the windows. So that looks good. Now we need to add our background so that this actually looks like a city and not just a building behind blank space. So let's go ahead and do that. So the great thing about Video Copilot and Element 3D is they actually give you a folder with a lot of useful resources like those HDRI environments for the reflections. So if you actually if you head over to your documents on your computer, you'll find a little Video Copilot folder. So we'll hop into that. And what you want to look for is your materials folder here. And then you'll see they have Metropolitan Skies. That will be downloaded if you do have the Metropolitan pack. So we're going to go over to the models folder. And then here you'll find all these packs which you've installed for Element 3D. Keep this folder open because we're going to use it later to customize our textures to make the building look a little bit more realistic. So you're going to want to hop into the materials folder here. If you do have Metropolitan, you'll have this Metropolitan Skies folder, which gives you some nice skyscape backgrounds. Now, if you don't, just go onto Google Images and just look up city background. You'll be able to find one. It's nice that they do offer this for the Metropolitan pack because you get these nice 4K pictures. So just click and drag this into our comp just like that. And then what you want to do is click and drag this into a layer below everything that we've done so far, and you'll see it fits in pretty nice. You also want to click toggle switches and modes down here and just make sure that this is a 3D layer. So enable that little 3D cube switch, and that'll switch around if we zoom out. So let's click V on our keyboard just to bring back our pointer, and then we'll rescale this to how we want. So I think something like that looks pretty good. And the reason why we created this as a 3D layer is if we go to our camera, we can actually click C and move around, and it'll move the background with it. So if I rotate, you'll see this is what we're working with. Everything's locked into 3D space. So once we do go in with these zooms like this, the background will move accordingly, which is great. So this is looking good. We're almost ready to hop into Adobe Premiere and add those color grade, the actual fog, going through those clouds, and then of course at the end we're going to talk about the tracking and then compositing things within these windows. Before we do all that, let's go ahead and touch on creating your actual camera animations. So go ahead and just click open your first camera, open up your transform options, and you'll see all of your little transformation. You'll see all your little transformation values. Let's go ahead and drag to the beginning, keyframe all of that, and then let's drag to around 5 seconds. So around the 5-second mark, let's say we click C on our keyboard to bring in our zoom for our camera. We want to zoom into maybe these windows here, like at the beginning of that music video where they kind of pulled into Travis Scott in the security room. Let's see what that looks like. So that's looking pretty good. Now I also want to say, if you want to make this faster, just click, drag your keyframes and bring them closer. And of course you want to make it slower, just pull them out like this. So pretty simple, create your nice simple little animation there. If you want to create different camera angles of this shot here, there's a pretty cool feature where you can actually hide this camera layer, and then you can right click here, go to new, and then bring in a new camera. So let's bring that in, and then within this new camera, you can actually go ahead and find a different angle. So say for example, we're at the end, we're going to render out some different little angles of maybe we'll make this camera just kind of pan up the windows. You can go ahead and do that. We'll just drag up so that it's kind of moving up like this. And then you can play that forward. So now we have a camera angle of it going up the building, and you can actually just hide the layers and switch back and forth between different camera angles and animations that you've created. So that's a super useful feature. You don't have to go into all different comps. You can, if you want, you can just copy and paste it into a new comp if you want to keep it organized. But what you can do is you can just rename these cameras into pan up building, and then I'll name my first camera into intro zoom, something like that. So it's very simple to create those actual animations that we're talking about. So we'll talk a little bit about the cameras more when we get to the actual masking, compositing, and tracking parts of this. I want to mention one more quick tip before we do add some of these compositing things I've been talking about. So I want to show you guys how you can fully customize the look of your buildings. You could always just grab a different building if you don't like the look of it, but say you like the design of this building model, but you think it looks a little bit too clean and cartoony. Say you want to make it a little bit more grungy, like how it is in the actual music video. There's a little bit more grunge and darkness on this building, so let's show you how we can dirty up the texture a bit. All you're going to need for this is a picture editing software. I'm going to use Photoshop. If you have the Adobe Creative Suite, you'll have Photoshop as well. If not, go for a free one like GIMP or GIMP, I think it's called. Anything that really has a brush you can add some grunge onto. So what you want to do once you get to this screen, we're going to click open, and we're going to head back to this folder here. So documents, video copilot, and we're going to go over to our models folder now. Now in our models folder, Metropolitan Maps, this contains all of the actual texture mapping for all of the buildings which are in the Metropolitan pack. So we can go down and find our apartment 1. So we can find our building 1. This is the texture map for the model that we used, or any other corresponding building for whatever model you're using. And we can actually select it. And also, before I say that, you want to make sure you grab the JPEG because it'll also include a DDS image. So this one's a DDS, this one is a JPEG. Select, Control C to copy, pop back into models, and if this is a little bit too confusing, don't worry, this is an optional step. I figured I would just show it for those of you that wanted to know. And you can right click here, create a new folder just like this. I already have one here called custom maps, and you can control V just to paste that in. You'll see I already have some scratchy ones made. So go ahead and select the map that you just copy and pasted in here and open it up. And within here, we can go ahead and make any adjustments. So I'm going to click Control J to just duplicate that layer so we can add our scratchiness without changing the original in case we do want to go back. And there's a few options you have here. So option number one is you grab your brush tool, you head over here, and there are some little presets. If you just scroll all the way down, they have these little special effects brushes, these Kyle splatter brushes. You can grab one of these concept brushes, which essentially just kind of scratches everything up. Click the brackets to actually make this smaller so that it's not as big of a difference. So that's one option you do have. Another option is that you can actually just grab and steal pieces from this grunge that's already there. So grab your rectangular selection tool and just grab a big strip of this here. Click Control J to duplicate that into its own layer. So Control T, this is now what I have selected. What I'm going to do is just rotate this, and then I'm going to kind of overlay this little clean gray area here, and then we'll drop this new scratchy texture back into Element, and you guys will see the difference. And like I said, since this is optional, I'm kind of going through this a little bit fast. I would just rewind if you are interested in this spot in particular, but essentially what we'll do is select the layer, Control J to duplicate it, and we'll just kind of keep overlaying like this. And then I'm going to put this on soft light so that it's just kind of a slight blend. And now you'll see we have more of a rocky textured overlay on there. Now you can go ahead and repeat those steps for this here. That's what I did in my original render. And this is really just, like I said, to add to this more grungy building so that it looks a little bit more realistic. And I'll show you the difference now. So hop back into Photoshop, click File, Save As. You're going to make this a JPEG, so select that. And we'll just add, I'll name it Scratchy 3. Click Save. Make that 12 quality. And then if we go back in After Effects and we open up our actual Element 3D, so select your building, Effect Controls, Scene Setup, you'll see that if I open up my building, here's building 1. This is the actual texture we used before. You'll see down here it has a little diffuse map. You can click onto that and then open up your own custom, so load from a file, and then you can hop back over to the models, go to your custom maps that we just made, and then load in Scratchy 3. So click open. So now you'll see that there's a little bit of scratchiness around this area, which we just added in. So let me show you the difference. I'll load in the actual texture I created before where I added the scratchiness onto all of these parts. So watch here while I do this and you'll see the difference snap on. Open up our first scratchy one, and like I said, make sure you're watching here, open, and bam. That just really shows what you can do with the textures to really customize the look if you want the same model but you want a different texture. So keep that in mind. That's a really great 3D tip. And I'll also leave a little link if you want to download this customized scratchy texture if you want to save some time and not have to do it yourself. So make sure you look down below for that. Now we have a little bit more realistic building. You'll see how much of a difference that really does make. So that's why I included that tip. Now we're ready to go and composite this in fully. For that, a little overview of what we did. We created our building, we created our camera animations, we created our background, we set up the environment so that we have these nice reflections here. Now we're ready to go ahead and color grade this. So we're going to click File and then Save. And then with that dynamic link, of course, you can do all the color grade in After Effects if you're used to it. I'm going to go in Premiere since we do have a dynamic link. Some quick little color correction tips. We'll select our building, go up to our color workspace here. And if you want to, you can make this a little bit more blue or to add a little bit more orange to make the building pop. I'll maybe add a tiny bit of orange, like 5.9 or 8. And then I'm going to add a lot more contrast to really get those shadows. You'll see it was a very nighttime. It was a very nice nighttime scene in the original. Now we want to go ahead and add in this cloudy fog, like we're going through the fog. Now the way that I actually did this, finding a little green screen cloud fly through clip. I'll leave a link to that below if you are interested, but this is the exact clip that I found, something like this. So go ahead and find a nice clip like this with some clouds, hop back into Adobe Premiere. I'm going to right click and just remove all this so we can start from scratch. Here's what it looks like just with the green screen. First steps first, I'm going to go over to my effects and presets and drop a little ultra key effect onto here. just like that. And we'll take out the green, so we only have the clouds. And then at this point, what you can do is you can hop over into your effect controls, go up to your blending modes, and maybe change it around to something like screen, overlay. I'm going to put it on screen and then just lower the opacity a bit. If you want to animate it so that it's kind of pushing through the clouds, what you can do is select it, position, scale, keyframe those, drag a bit forward, and then we'll just kind of scale this forward like this. Here's what that looks like. Too fast, we'll drag that all the way to the end. That looks a lot better, and if you want, you can just go into After Effects. You can make this a 3D layer. If you are working with like a still image cloud, you can link it up with the camera movement and have the exact camera movement if you want to be technical with it. This is just a quick little workaround. So let's make the clouds fade out when we kind of push through. Select it, keyframe your opacity, drag a bit, and then just make it 0. Just a simpler way of doing it. And say, for example, you are going to do it within After Effects. So let's hop in here. Here's a version I did with the actual clouds. What I did was I made them 3D layers by enabling the switch. Once you get to the point where you want to move through the cloud, you can actually open up your transform, just take your Z position. You can just move it to where it does move out away from the screen whenever you get to a certain place. So you guys should know how to animate these in terms of the look, but that's the basics around adding that fog fly through. Of course, if the color grade isn't working for you, you want to maybe change one specific aspect of it, you guys can hop back into After Effects. You can search for a little curves effect in your effects and presets, drop that on either the building or the background layer, and then you can change that individually. So I'll maybe make the background darker, file save it, and then you'll see the difference just like that. So I showed you the basics with our color grade. Once you're ready to start doing the tracking and bringing our actual people to the windows, also I'm going to show you how to add some lights first as a starter. Go ahead and select the camera angle that you want to start with first. So we're going to start with our intro zoom, and we're going to just start off by adding some little lights onto here, and then maybe a beginner little track on these windows. File, save, and you can render out within After Effects by just going to File, export, putting it in your render queue, or you can just hop into Premiere and you can render it straight out of Premiere. Now make sure you don't render with the clouds. You just want the building, and then the clouds will be just brought in later. That's why we didn't add the glow until later, because we don't want anything messing up our tracking. We just want to have a nice clean plate for the track. Go up to File, Export, Media, and then just export this clip as normal. I actually have a little preset just so that we don't lose any quality here, and that's basically just using CBR with a bitrate of 40 if you guys are interested. Alright guys, back over into After Effects. Let's go ahead and create a new composition here. So we're going to hop to Project. We're going to open up what we just exported from Premiere or After Effects, whatever you do use to export that. I'll drag that clip into our project bin, and then I'll also select that clip once it's rendered in. And then with that clip, we'll just drag that into a new composition just like that. We have our clip, we have our new composition. All we need to do now is track, and we're going to start easy. We're going to put some lights over here just to kind of match the original music video. Let me show you what that's looking like. So we want these little light flares here. Hop back over into After Effects, and there's a few different ways that we can actually do this. For the lights, we're going to do it one way. For the windows, we're going to do it a second way. So starting with the lights, we're going to right click on our footage here. We're going to go to Track and Stabilize, and we're going to do a track camera. Now this is going to analyze, and the reason why we're doing this is so that we can just get a rough estimate of the overall camera movement, which is what we need to track onto a specific target. Okay guys, and our track went through. If I scroll along here, since it's a building, there's a lot of different things to track onto, so it should be a pretty simple track. What you can do now is, let's go ahead and find a little area where we want to place this light. We'll place it maybe on this little red target here. So let's find a general area between there. Right click here, create a solid and a camera, which is great. And then let's go ahead and select this track solid, and we're going to orient it so that it's facing the way we want. So just open up your transform options and then change around our orientation like this. It's a little bit rotated, so you may need to kind of work around with that, and then just scale that down. So we'll place it on this little dot here, and if we play through, it does a good job. It's sticking to that target area that we want. We can make any other adjustments later on, but that is working fine for us now. So next, what you want to do is right click on that track solid and just pre-compose it, and we're going to name this red light and click OK. And now we can double click and go into that pre-comp for the red light, and we can just delete this track solid. Make sure you have enough composition space here. So click comp, Go to your composition, comp settings. 1080 by 1080 is fine for this. If it's a little bit too small, like it's like tiny pixels, just kind of buff that up a bit. Now for the light itself, here's what we're going to do. We're going to right click down here and go to new, solid, and we're going to name this red light and click OK. We're going to go to our effects and presets, and we're just going to look up a lens flare, and we're going to place that on here like that. And now you can actually take the center of your lens flare and just center that out. I'm also going to go up to my effect controls and find this little flare center target. I'm just going to place that where all these little crazy lens flare reflection things are happening, so that's nice and centered, and we just basically get a bright light. Now you can also go through your different presets if you want a different one. The color doesn't really matter because we can change that with curves. So maybe if you want something like this, you can just go and look up a curves effect again, double click to place that here, and we'll just bump up the red like that, bump down the blue, and then we'll bump down the green so we get a pure red light just like that. If this is too wide a reflection, you guys can alt click on these little masking tools and just draw a little mask around this, so something like that, and then open up your mask, bump your feather, and then I'll also blend this with the original a bit, and that's looking okay so far for our red light. You can also control D and duplicate that, maybe even grab that mask on your duplication and just shrink it a bit. Then we'll grab the curves for this one and we'll just make it brighter so it kind of just has like a white center. You can even just grab and shrink it like this, and now we have a white center like how the original is. Tiny little center there, maybe even make it a bit smaller, and that's looking good. So just to show you what we're really doing here, if you click file, save, and then you go back to our main composition with our building, you'll see now in that little target track solid area, there's a little red light popping up, and we can actually scale that up. Here's what that looks like. So we'll play that. There you go. You can see it's tracked in. Click toggle switches and modes and just make sure that's on something like linear dodge add or something like screen, just so that you really get that blend of light in there. Let's also go in and just kind of add this little light streak here. Hop back into After Effects. We're gonna go ahead and right click, create another new solid. Make sure you make this solid the actual color you're going for. So I'm gonna make it red and click OK. I'm going to alt click on this until we have our rectangular selection tool and just make a little line. And then we can just place that in the center by holding Control. And then I'll hold Control on my keyboard and I'll make this kind of pointed towards the center like that. So it's kind of like a little streak of light. Now click toggle switches and modes where you see your blending modes. Put this on something like add. We also want to click M on our keyboard to bring up your mask options and just feather that, and that'll look a little bit better. And then we can go ahead and just add a normal little glow effect onto there, just the built-in After Effects one if you don't have any plugins. And you can mess around with how that really looks. So maybe up the radius to get a wider spread on that, and then click file, save, hop back into the comp to see what that's looking like. And for some reason this is rotated so that the streak is up and down, so we're just going to go ahead and open that up, grab our Z rotation, move that over, and now you'll see we have our streak. If we make that wider, there you go. So something like that, guys. Correspond to what you're doing here. If you want to change something, you can just hop back into the pre-comp, lower the brightness, whatever you want to do. So hop back in here. We're going to select that, Control D to duplicate it, and then we'll just move it over to this side. And that's actually looking pretty good. Now, if these little light streaks are a little bit too annoying, you can, again, using your masking tools, let's go ahead and just draw a little square over here, change that mask to subtract, and then you can just feather it to make it a bit softer. And there you go, guys. That's how you can add that light streak tracked onto your actual buildings. So that's pretty cool. Now I need to show you how we can track the windows, one of the most important parts of the whole video, showing our footage within the actual windows. So what I recommend you do for here is not use the 3D camera tracker. I recommend that you use a motion tracker. And if you guys are confused about After Effects tracking, I made an ultimate guide talking about all the different ways you can track in After Effects. Check out the link below if you need a little brush up, but if not, just follow along with this tutorial. So I'm going to drag to the very end here, and I'm going to find this kind of square place of window here. I'm going to select our footage, and this is why we render it out, because you don't want to be tracking onto the element 3D layer. You want to track onto just normal video footage so that we can hop into the layer. So that's why we render it out before everything. That's why we don't just do it onto our main master comp. You want to render it out and do all the adjustments before you start doing your tracking and your compositing. So right click on your footage of your building, go to track and stabilize, and this time instead of track camera, we're going to track motion. So it'll pop up a little track point and our tracker window. Let's zoom in here, and the only things we really need to do with this is let's go ahead and change the track type from transform to perspective corner pin. And then you're going to want to go ahead and place each of these on the corner of our windows, and make sure you're doing this correctly, because sometimes if you put the wrong track point on the wrong corner, whenever we do pin in our footage, it'll get a little bit warped. It'll place the wrong corners in the wrong places. We're going to go ahead and just click back or forward depending on where you start. Since we're zooming in, I just started at the end of the footage where everything's bigger. I'm going to click back here, and you'll see this will track backwards. Now if that messes up, just Control Z to undo that and just try and fix this so that that doesn't happen. Sometimes you guys will just have to really experiment with this and try and find a good tracking method. If After Effects tracking isn't cutting it, you may want to look into either Mocha or a software like Buju. Okay, so we did our perspective pin track, as you guys can see, just like that. If there's any parts that mess up, we'll just go through here, and sometimes it might pop off or something. You guys can actually just manually fix that. Just zoom in here, and wherever the track might get messed up, just drag and fix that. So we have our track all set up. What we're going to do now is bring in the footage that we want to place in this window. So this part's important because you really need to set up your footage as if you are looking through a window. So put it on a tripod, get that wide angle of the entire room. I'll just bring in this little video of me sitting at my desk. It won't look that realistic, but it'll get the job done in terms of showing you how to put it inside the window. So with that footage in our composition, what you want to do is go back and double click on your layer with our track here. When once you're in the layer, it'll show our tracking info again and pop our track window up. Now click edit target, and you're going to want to make the target our footage that we just brought in, and click OK. And then we'll show that footage. And there you go. As you can see, completely tracked into there. Now we just need to blend it into the window itself. So select our footage. Make sure you click toggle switches and modes to see your blending modes. We'll go ahead and put that on something like screen. Multiply, you guys can mess around with the color modes that you really want. Soft light and hard light usually is a good option as well. And you'll see it does really look like I'm behind the window. The perspective is definitely off, but that's something you need to do with the planning. You can even put it on screen and maybe just lower the opacity a bit. Anything you can do to really get that fully tracked in there. If you do have these kind of bars in between the windows, you could even make some track masks or do some more tracking. So what I'm doing is I'm placing these on add, Control D, put it on its own layer, and then I'll delete the mask off the original. And that's how you can bring in that window still over everything. Okay guys, that is the basics of this tutorial. For the music video itself, they probably spent countless hours just tweaking everything, because obviously it's for such a huge song. They know it's going to be a very important video. So the key things is take what I showed you in this tutorial, to put a lot of time into it, put a lot of preciseness into it. I showed you the basics, but you can take it to the next level by customizing it your own way and really putting in the hours to polish it all up. So I hope that does give you a good standpoint. So I hope that does give you a good starting point for creating your own thing like this. It's an awesome thing that you can do to incorporate into your music videos, and it adds a lot of cool creative depth into being able to really put cameras all over a 3D building which you created, and just bring whatever is in your mind to life. So hope you guys did enjoy. All relevant links will be down in the description. But anyways guys, as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for supporting, and I'll see you guys in the next one.